am Pastor Tina Davis, and I have the privilege today of interviewing Dr. Cyrus Williams, who is a licensed counselor, a professor at Regent University, and specializes in a variety of things in the area of counseling. But I know, well, just because I know him, he does a lot of work in marriage, and he does a lot of work with addictions.
Absolutely.
And today we just want to take some time to hone in a little bit. Now, obviously, we could talk for hours, but we're just going to spend about 15 minutes just asking a couple of questions to bring in some folks to have a broader understanding of the area of addictions.
Okay.
And so I have a few questions for you.
Excellent. Okay.
The first question I want to ask is, if someone's encountering someone with addictions, what are some common signs or symptoms that they might see?
Yeah, well, that's a broad question because
It is.
addictions are broad, right? So if we talk about chemical addictions, and I'll be focusing on that for the most part. But chemical addictions, there's going to be the physical and it's going to be the psychological kind of symptoms. They're different, but let's just talk about some of the physical ones. You might see things like irritability, mood stuff, irritability. You might see physical things like pupils dilated. You'll see unkempt behavior, body odor, those type of things, right? You'll see those, and then you'll see things that are behavioral. Like, no, their friends are different or no friends. Eating's going to be differently, maybe sleeping differently, too much sleeping, too much eating, too little of either one. There's so many other symptoms that could happen. There's some spiritual stuff that I deal with all the time. People just don't want to go to church, don't want to engage in those ways. You got to watch that. To me, that's like a first one, right? For Christians, it's like a first one of just getting away from God and having that guilt and shame. So there's a lot of other symptoms that may include, like I said, irritability, paranoia. And I'm not talking about clinical paranoia. I'm just talking about people watching me over my shoulder, me being restless, There's the lying happens, just avoiding people, all of that stuff, being alone a lot more than they used to. We are creatures of habit. So the first symptom is the habits are different. That's the big thing. The big thing is we're creatures of habit. That's the way we live. So when people start doing things, coming in later, not talking to people, talking to a whole different group of friends, don't enjoy their hobbies anymore, those are the big things that you got to kind of keep your eyes open. It's not developmental. It's just abrupt. It's
so
like
it doesn't
abrupt.
happen. It happens pretty quickly.
Yeah, you'll see it. You'll see it. Maybe you didn't notice it, but you'll see it. After you notice it, you're like, oh, this has happened in the last 3 months.
Sure.
So those are the things you have to watch out for. And as they come along, you just want to just kind of monitor it. You're probably not ready to talk yet, but you want to kind of monitor it. And maybe even ask somebody else if they're noticing some of those things.
Right, find out if others are seeing the same changes.
Absolutely.
And this is specific, you're talking about specific for chemical addictions. Would you say that other addictions have similar?
Similar, definitely. When you're talking about sex addictions, porn addictions, gambling addictions, gaming addictions, they're about the same. For porn, there may be much more, obviously, screen watching alone. For gaming, there's going to be lots of hours online. And it's just not going to be an engagement. And we have to understand that engagement is different nowadays because we think because people are online that they're engaging, but that's not the kind of engagement that we're talking about. It's a different world. People engage with games, and I understand that, but really not even talking to family and friends and that type of engagement is as important.
So the disconnection is one of the big symptom with addictions, is that when they disconnect from people that they normally would stay connected to, even if it's online connection, and they withdraw from that, that's a big sign.
In the irritability.
That one's a big one.
That's a big one.
When they start getting cranky,
they get
pay attention.
more than usual. Every time you say something, they're getting cranky. They don't want to engage in any way, shape, or form. Now, I have a 15-year-old and an 11, about to be 12-year-old, so developmentally we got to watch it.
Right,
But
right.
when you see it pretty quickly,
Yeah.
it's like overnight. You're like, something's wrong.
Something isn't right.
Yeah, something's wrong, and you continue to watch.
Well, with that in mind and seeing these symptoms that you're mentioning, and I'm sure it's much broader than that,
Yeah.
but this kind of helps people hone in a little bit if they're seeing people with these signs and symptoms. What are some steps that somebody can take with somebody who's challenged by addictions, or when you begin to see these symptoms?
Right. Ask a friend. First of all, a friend, right?
Okay.
Just to help me kind of talk it through. What we want to do is we want to extend grace and mercy. Let's just start there, okay? We don't need to jump down anybody's back. We don't need to accuse anybody. We need to come at this in love, right? And that's really hard to do when you're a parent, when you're a spouse, when you see people deteriorating in front of you. It's really hard to do.
You kind of want to panic, right?
Yeah, we all panic.
Yeah.
But I've been saying this word a lot lately. Is it worth it? And that's my word I've been saying for the last month and a half. I don't know why I've been saying it all the time. It's like, it's worth it for you the relationship is worth it. So don't sacrifice the relationship just because, even if you're right, just because you're right. Don't sacrifice it. So it's got to be worth it. You got to do it in love and in grace. So there are tiers to engaging. Number one is you're going to have to say, hey, I've been noticing some changes in your mood, in your health, in your interest in other people. So you got to have a loving conversation with them. That's going to be, kind of number one. Don't get into the whole intervention things, like the TV intervention stuff. When you're trying to, when you're trying to bring family in and this and that. Listen, that works when you have a professional who's doing it for you, but don't do that. But you do want to talk to them about what's going on. If they're addicted to something and dependent on something, they're going to lie. They're going to really go off. So you have to be prepared for those type of things. So be loving. Understand that this is not a secret any longer. I'm saying this out loud. And then you have to kind of put some boundaries up. You really have to put some loving boundaries up. Like, you can't go here. You're not gonna jeopardize our house. We have children, or your brothers and sisters, whatever the age group. You got to put some boundaries down. And then if it's really a point where you are afraid for their lives or the safety of your household or whatever, you have to encourage them to see someone, to talk to somebody. You have to do it. Parents are so afraid to do this with their children. I'd rather the afraid parents than the ones who jump all over them and push them away. I'd rather that. But reach out to somebody. Get to a professional. I have parents who call me without the person, the kid or the spouse, and say, I don't know what to do. And I think that's the best thing you can do. Always, you can talk to a pastor. All that stuff has to happen. But number one, you need to start praying. All right, we're Christians. We can't pretend like we're not Christians, right? So let's start praying. Let's start doing what we need to do and interceding and do all that work, and then go into a loving kind of conversation with them.
So get the Holy Spirit involved as quick as possible. If you don't know what to do, call somebody and ask for help. And then lead with love is what I'm hearing you say when you have to have a hard conversation and say, hey, I see some things going on, and then go down that.
And then boundaries.
And then boundaries was a big
Gotta
one.
have boundaries. Gotta have boundaries. Now that we said it out loud, we have to have some boundaries in the house. You have to decide. I had a conversation a couple of days ago. You have to decide what boundaries are important, and then you have to be okay with the consequences of the boundaries. You can't just set boundaries and don't like the consequences, because the consequences may mean pushing them away and out the house. So you have to be careful with your boundaries, talk about them, but they have to be real, but you have to understand the consequences of them.
And this might be why people need to get some help.
Absolutely.
Because you don't always see because you're so emotionally involved, right? So maybe that's not something you would need a second set of eyes to say.
Absolutely.
What this means this. If you said this, then it looks like this. That's great.
I would also, as I'm setting my boundaries, I would encourage the help. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that, them to get into some help. Like, as quickly as possible, they need to get some help.
So I was that's my next question. Like, what are some resources? Like, what are resources that you would recommend for somebody who is in relationship with someone who's in addiction, and that's where the help part comes in. Yeah.
Right. The boundaries are going to have to be that you're going to have to go get some help.
Yeah.
Right. That's going to be the boundary. Is go to support groups, and they're out there on every corner all day long, all evening long, no matter what the problem is. They're out there. So that's got to be a boundary. Go to a professional, get a licensed mental health counselor to go talk to. Depends on what level of care we're talking about here. Now, if we're talking about somebody who is just experimenting and you're just a little afraid, I have people I'm working with right now. They have children who are experimenting. That doesn't mean they're an addict, and I have to kind of sometimes bring the parent down. Like they're not an addict. They just are experimenting, and it's important that we intervene, and we're going to do the counseling. But there might be another level, and the next level might be a residential care. And there's some residential cares agencies around. They can Pavilion, Virginia Psychiatric Services. I think I'm saying that wrong.
Virginia Beach Psych.
Virginia Beach Psych. Thank you. Virginia Psych. The Farley Center.
Yes.
These are some residential programs that are around. And then you have intensive outpatient. And intensive outpatient is kind of in between. Like you have private counseling, which they can come to a person like me or someone else who's working with private counseling. They can do intensive outpatient, which is basically usually like a Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5 all day. It's not residential, but it is intense. And of course, we have the community service boards that are out there, especially if we have money issues. We want to do that. But we want to assess what level they're at so we can give them the right help that they need. It's not always the best thing for them to come to private practice first, because they may be at another level. So we have to talk about that. Reach out to somebody who knows what's going on and can assess and do those things.
And maybe the private practice is to help determine how deep is this, and do you go to your community for assistance? Do you go to residential? Do you do intensive outpatient? And I love that you started with the support groups, because I know some people are like, I don't know, does that really work? Is that really helpful? But they are so available.
They're so available, and they are helpful. Now, listen, I have to fight with patients all the time. Like, go. And they're like, no, I don't want to share my business. There's all these people. Listen, they're effective because they're regular people struggling like you who can mentor and walk with you. Celebrate recovery. Wonderful, wonderful opportunity for you to hear the word, get the word as part of your treatment. So that stuff has to happen. Support groups, you cannot overlook the support groups, because when you're in my care for an hour, right? Then the rest of the day, you need some of these other opportunities to connect, to get a mentor, get a sponsor, all that stuff. All that stuff.
So those are all really helpful resources, and so much of it can be found in the community too if you don't know where to even begin. And at church, at New Life, if you need to call somebody, we can help as well. But there's generally
you can go online, and they're readily available. They're online now. You can do them Zoom calls now. So the confidentiality is even another level, right? Because you're online, and I think that might help some people to go. And it's every topic. I mean, it's every topic, from anxiety to sex and porn to alcohol to chemicals, cocaine, all that stuff. They're on every corner. I'm telling you, there's not a time when one's not going on. Every day, 24 hours a day. Might be a different time zone, but 24 hours a day.
But you can find some kind of support and help.
You'll find it. You'll find it.
So I have one more question, because we could, like I said, we could do this for a long time, but I want to make sure we're sensitive to some time here. What are some myths that people believe, common myths that people have about addictions?
Right. Well, it looks a certain way. The person looks a certain way. They have to be a wreck. They have to look homeless, disheveled. They have to be arrested. They can't go to work. Those type of myths of this idea of what it looks like to be an addict. Addict can look like me, or you, or anybody else. Addicts could be very functioning every day, all day long. So please don't do that. And the other end of that is you don't have to drink a lot to be an alcoholic. You just have to drink consistently, and it has to be a problem with your life. It's not about the chemicals or the behavior.
Yeah.
It's about how it affects your life.
Yeah.
So if you're missing work, you have relationship problems, financial problems, health problems. This has nothing to do with police, and it's nothing to do with that stuff. It has to do with how it's affecting your life.
Sure. And by the time it gets to the other stuff, it might be so far gone.
It might be
but
gone,
it's just how
yeah.
is it?
Yeah. So it doesn't have to. You don't have to be a pass out drunk, or you don't have to spend all day doing something to have the dependence part of this. That word addictions, I know we use in the community, but it's really about dependence and physiologically brain changes. A couple of weeks ago, you talked about neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
That's what I want to talk
That was my favorite word.
Neuroplasticity. And listen, your brain can recover, but we got to get you clean first, and it can happen.
And in order to do that, you have to be willing to say, hey, there's a problem here, and we need to get some help.
And the other myth is like, you don't have to hit rock bottom to start. People always say rock bottom. And rock bottom is funny because your rock bottom becomes another rock bottom, becomes another rock bottom.
Yeah.
So that's not the way we want to work here. We want to start growing and building wherever you're at right now. You don't have to hit rock bottom for you to start your work, your journey.
Yeah.
And the person who's not dependent or addicted, they play a great role. They play a great role. We have to get it. Let me give you one last. That just came to my mind. One last myth is that they like it and they want to continue to do it.
Oh, that's good.
No, they don't. They don't like it. They don't want to do it.
Sure.
They don't like look at the shame that you get. That you and the guilt. They don't like that. They've been taken over by this behavior or this chemical. They don't like it. They're not going to one day just say, I'm going to quit. Those kind of myths, those are not helpful. Those are not helpful to them.
That's so good. And I think that's what takes us right back to that grace and mercy.
Yeah.
The idea that, listen, with someone with addictions, they're not like, I'm living my life, my best life. There's a struggle there. And so there's need for that grace and mercy to say,
absolutely,
we're going to walk with you through this process.
Absolutely. Listen, it's idolatry. And I will tell you all that we all have it. And thank God that coffee is not.
Thank God.
That coffee and chocolate is not. Because
Listen,
might
if
be
we start
your
talking
vice.
about coffee, we might have to stop this interview altogether.
That might be your vice, but thank God it's not illegal, right? So it doesn't really matter. We all are in this club, but God has spared us for some reason, and He can bring everybody else back to the fold too.
I love it.
We just need that prayer, man. I can say this here, right?
Yeah.
We need to intercede in that prayer.
That's right.
Prayer changes things. We can't just read that and say that. It really is truthful.
There is no sin uncommon to man.
Absolutely.
But God always makes a way of an escape. And that's part of what this is all about, is finding those ways of escape, supporting one another, and helping. And then this particular segment about people with addictions. Dr. Williams, you're wonderful. We look forward to having you at another time for another conversation. But I hope this was helpful to you. If you have any other questions, please reach out. You can reach out to New Life or to your community to find additional support. God bless.